There you are, my beautiful people, and happy Sunday. If you're new to this channel, I'm Jet Ski Chuck. I try to edit out as many curse words as possible just because I don't want that type of stuff floating out in your living room, because I love you like that. If you're new to this channel, I'm Jet Ski Chuck. We dive into some of the most disturbing TikToks and just flat out scary theories. There might be a couple moments that make you cringe, but we'll get through it. 2 things we need to do before we get started. 1, hit that like button. 2, hit that subscribe button. With that being said, this is the most disturbing videos on the internet today. Let's dive in.
By now, most of us know about the Flesh Pedestrian and Wendy Boy of Navajo and Algonquin tribal lore. But did you know the Southeast United States, particularly Florida? By now, most of us know about the Flesh Pedestrian and Wendy Boy of Navajo and Algonquin tribal lore. But did you know the Southeast United States, particularly Florida, has its own version of a Flesh Pedestrian? This creature originates from Seminole tribal lore. Let me introduce you to your new nightmare, the Stikini. Similar to a Flesh Pedestrian, Stikinis were once people. They became very evil, very powerful witches. When the moon rises, they wander out into the forest far away from civilization so that nobody can see them. There, they will vomit up their organs, their soul, and their blood, and become a humanoid owl creature. In this form, Stikinis will have the head of an owl and the body and arms of a human being. They might also have human legs, but in addition, they have powerful owl wings. And just like an owl hunting its prey, Stikinis are very fast and very quiet. Once they home in on a victim, it is probably too late. Stikinis are very fond of eating people, especially their hearts. While in this humanoid owl form, Stikinis will hang their internal organs high up in a tree so that animals and people cannot find them. Stikinis are incredibly strong and can rip a grown person in half with ease. And as if that isn't terrifying enough, they also have a habit of crying like a banshee. Cry is said to be deep and guttural, and if you hear it, it is likely an omen of death. Like a Flesh Pedestrian, the name of a Stikini is considered so powerful that many in Seminole culture refuse to say it. It is believed that this could help them find you or turn you into one. Instead, only the most powerful men and women in Seminole cultures would say it because they had the power to fight these creatures off. To hunt a Stikini, you have to find where it hung its organs and destroy them, and this would keep them from turning back into their human form, and once the sunlight hits them, they would be destroyed. I personally don't recommend this unless you know exactly where the organs are and you are Usain Bolt fast.
That sounds like it'll make a cool movie, wouldn't it?
And find out what brought it into existence to begin with. Are you following me? Here we have, in CERN, Switzerland, a huge wheel. Inside that wheel is a Hindu god, and his name is Shiva. He does a dance of destruction inside that wheel, and his purpose is he is one of the triad gods, one of the greatest gods of Hinduism. Shiva, Vishnu, and Brahma. Brahma is the god of creation. Vishnu is the god of preservation, but Shiva is the god of destruction. The way the Hindu sees it is that when Shiva destroys, it's not for the purpose of annihilation. He destroys so that Brahma can come and recreate. So now when the Hindu, since they're scientists to CERN, they put this out there in front, and so what these people are doing with the collider is destroying what comes together, but for the purpose of recreating.
They were doing the same dance. I remember that video. I Pet Goat too, I believe. What type of pure demonic activity is going on here? Look at the cape. What type of final boss is this, is the question.
Now, from the time Ben Franklin discovered electricity by flying his famous kite with a key on it in a thunderstorm until we had electric lights in 1890 was about 100 years. From about 1790 to 1890, about 100 years, we developed electric lights. You know, Ben Franklin wasn't technologically advanced in electricity or electronics. 100 years later, we've got computers in 1990. People before the flood were living to be 900 years old. Now picture a civilization in which people don't die for hundreds of years. You know, when I develop my knowledge, I have to write that down. From age 0 to age 30, I didn't accomplish anything in life. I'd never written a book. I'd never written anything down of any consequence. From age 30 until age 65, I have written, I couldn't count the number of books that I've written. I probably have 50 or 75 books. I wrote a lot of material. I write on legal subjects, and I have a lot of written material here. I teach school. I write most of the material that goes into my textbooks. My entire working career, everything that I have learned, everything that I have written down and preserved for the next generation had to have been done in about 40 working years. Can you imagine what I could accomplish if I could live to be 300 years old? Can you imagine how much I would write, how much I would know, how much I could disseminate to the next generation if I had 300 years to do what I've done over the past 40?
That's a good point. I never really thought about it like that. The wisdom is off the charts. 200 years old? Man.
It doesn't strike me as being preposterous that people before the flood had developed electricity and electric light bulbs. Hell, we did it in the last 200. Adam didn't even have children until he was 130. The guy lives to be, 930 years old. He could have done it by himself.
Is that true? Let's type it in. How old was Adam when he had his first kid? Wow, 130. And he named him Seth.
It's been reported that those people before the flood were smarter than we are today. Their IQs were better. I don't know that that's necessarily true, but I wouldn't doubt it. We're digging up now in archaeological digs, we're digging up the evidence that they had electroplating, for crying out loud. That's pretty significant metallurgy. And the Bible reports that they were artificers in brass and iron. Now, people that are artificers in brass and iron are advanced. They're ahead of casting cannon in sand, which is where we were with Columbus in 1500. So from 1500 to 2000, we had made gigantic strides in metallurgy. We were making railroad rails, building iron ships by 1900.
Look at that dome piece, that elongated dome piece at their foot. Look. Maybe Coneheads was based on a true story.
There's an electric battery from ancient Babylon in the form of a clay pot with an electrode down through the bottom which holds the acid inside, with an iron rod, copper cylinder, earthenware jar, copper disc, wire out the top with a pitch collar and an unknown electrolyte. That's what they dug out back in the 1880s and then took it back to the British Museum. Didn't know what they had. You dig something out of the ground and you say, well, I don't know what this is. Take a look at human anatomy 100 years ago and say, well, these are vestigial organs. We don't know what a tonsil or an adenoid or an appendix does in the body, so therefore, because of our theory of evolution, we believe that these are vestigial organs. And so when I was a kid, they used to cut people's tonsils and adenoids out. I don't know how I survived it. We used to say, if God had intended, then he would have done. That was her mantra. If God had intended that, he would have done it. Every kid in school had his tonsils and adenoids removed. Now we find out reported he had never seen a case of a person who had tonsils and adenoids. It's a part of your immune system, kids.
For context, this video is strictly for entertainment purposes only. Do your own research on everything. This is just theories and hypothesis, not factual. The sound theory.
Con lo que hay aquí, con el instrumento, ¿verdad? Porque recordemos que la flauta es un instrumento ancestral. Yo con mi cosita. Vamos a ver qué pasa.
Man, he hit that. I was waiting for a magical bird to come through the trees and land on his shoulder. How he was hitting that and looking around. An elephant come through and, just bow down and start listening. That's what the vibes I was getting. Imagine hitting that flute and that steel drum together. Man, that would be some type of frequency, wouldn't it? I wonder what the name of that flute is. He hit that.
My husband gets me this book, okay? And he's so excited about this book. And it was hand-bound book on symbols. And it had a big pentagram on it and a bunch of other symbols. And as soon as I saw this gift, I knew that I should not accept it, but I didn't want to hurt his feelings. So I took the book in. And
why did he get it for you?
Why?
What was it about the book that he thought would be a good gift for you? Like interest in the symbols and understanding them?
Right.
Gotcha. So it wasn't like he was
understand that since with my testimony and my history, that this could possibly be a foothold. We had no concept of spiritual warfare, not really, other than when you see a spirit or you feel a spirit, you just rebuke it in the name of Jesus, and that should be enough.
Yeah.
Come to find out, that is not enough sometimes.
Right.
Sometimes, in what I've experienced, sometimes rebuking something in the name of Jesus is like throwing sand into a hurricane, where it's like nothing happens.
Should I tell him? No, don't do it. Don't do it, Chuck. Chuck, don't do it! Chuck, stop! Maybe you should try the true name. The original Paleo-Hebrew name, Yahushua. Some people jump in the comments, Chuck, it's Yeshua. Well, let me show you why I say Yahushua.
Warning. Oxygen levels are critical. Get in, then get out fast. Warning. Warning.
Strong's Concordance. It basically breaks down all the words in the Bible from the earliest forms, basically, that they can find it. If you have a Strong's Concordance, I'm not no preacher or nothing, but maybe this might help you out if it's not working. On the Strong's Concordance, I go to page 109. It says at the top, Hebrew Aramaic 109. $30.91. This is on Hebrew Aramaic, page 109. Go to $30.91. Look at that name, Yahushua. From Jehovah Save, Jehoshua, the Jewish leader. I'll let you guys read that. Now take a good look at that name in Hebrew. Yehoshua is how it's pronounced. Yahushua. If you look at the 218, I believe it was in the Dead Sea Scrolls 218 times. Now, I don't get into the name doctrine, I don't push, you have to say Jesus, you have to say Yeshua, you have to say Yahushua. It gets deep. I've seen people fall out about that. Everyone's on their own individual journey, and that's what you have to work out. Just do your research, and if you have a love for the truth, you would dig through this and find out. But I can testify that he's done miracles in my life. He's brought me through some storms. That's just me. I hear this young lady saying that, the name Jesus, you throw it it's like throwing it in a sandstorm. No, he moves mountains for you by just the name alone. Anything is possible with the name. So before we went any further, I just feel like you guys should know this. Now, I'm not the best teacher when it comes to this type of stuff. All I can do is just point you in the right direction, and you have to do the legwork yourself. So if things really aren't going your way, you might want to try it. Now I'm gonna drive it home real quick before we move on. Now let's find the tetragrammaton if we can. Tetragrammaton. Now when you break down the tetragrammaton, it says YHWH, as you can see. And Yahushua's father's name is Yahuwah when you break down the YHWH. The syllables in between it with Paleo Hebrew spell Yahuwah. I am who I am. I believe this was revealed to Moses during the burning bush. Alright, I'm sure we all can agree that if you look at that Hebrew from the tetragrammaton, we know that's YHWH, right? Now let me see if I can find Jesus' name. Aha! You guys see that? In Hebrew, that's his name, Jesus' name. That's his name in Hebrew. So if we take a quick screenshot of that and you compare it to 391, Yahushua. Now, if you look very carefully, I attached two different screenshots with the names side by side so you can see the similarities, both from different books. So you can compare the two and come up to your own conclusions. I say Jesus because a lot of people don't know the true name. A lot of people say Yeshua, but it's a little bit more oomph to it. And I believe when you hit that oomph, he really hears you. He's like, man, he's trying his best. You know, he might speak full-blooded English, but he's trying his best to decipher as far back as he can. And I'm telling you, watch something happen. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, Jesus' name doesn't work. It actually means other stuff. It may work for you. But if you find that it doesn't, you might want to line some stuff up.
Jesus is still there with you, but like the root of the issue is not being solved. It's like you're trying to heal like a Band-Aid on it, or like put a Band-Aid on a broken arm, you know? So anyway, so he got me this book. Okay. And I took it in and I put it on my dresser, and our dresser, like we always pray every night and right in front of our dresser, right? So immediately we start becoming tormented. Everybody starts having nightmares. Myself, my husband, my children start having nightmares. My children start seeing monsters in the dark. My 2-year-old would see the happy monster from the playroom, and I would rebuke it. And he would say, it worked, it's gone. But then like a few minutes later, it would be back again. So, and then I started having like sleep paralysis attacks all of the time. I started vaping again, which God had healed me of smoking. And so I started vaping again, and like we stopped, we were not going to church because I had just given birth, and we weren't praying. I was not in the word. Like I fell away hard, and it was just a living nightmare. So this went on for a couple of weeks until finally I had this nightmare where I believe that God gave me this dream where I was standing in the dark and I see myself as a teenager doing witchcraft, and I see like a big pentagram and I see the book, and I know like the book is what is causing this. And then I feel a presence behind me, and I go to rebuke the presence, and I cannot say Jesus. Jesus will not come out of my mouth. Like it's stealing the air out of my lungs. And then I'm screaming, and then I wake up and I know, okay, it's the book. My husband gets me this book. Okay.
I would have threw that book in the campfire so quick.
There's a place called Secret Canyon where there's allegedly a portal, some kind of interdimensional portal. And I thought all of this was just crazy nonsense. But there are incredibly brave and super, super interesting people, Jeremiah Horstman and his wife Alexandra particularly, who live in Sedona, and they've been doing some really clever on-the-ground research. Mm-hmm. One of the things we did, a lot of the stuff we got, as so often happens, you can't put it in the story because you can't get these people to go on camera. But there was a number of people who would privately admit that they'd been walking in what is public land, and they'd be stopped by men with guns, Men in uniform with automatic weapons, clearly highly trained elite soldiers, probably tier 1 operatives from the way they moved, and they would basically order people, go away or we will kill you. And if you looked at a particular place over Secret Mountain, you would see this big orb being escorted by helicopters rising from behind Secret Mountain. There's a place called Secret Canyon where
Maybe that'll explain all the F-16s and F-22s flying around that area.
The story of Rumpelstiltskin is not just a story written by the Grimm's brothers, but it's actually a very ancient story that's been told through different cultures. There's this farmer who promises the king that his daughter can spin straw into gold. So the king takes a daughter, and the daughter's like, I can't do that. And the king's like, do it, or else I'm going to kill you. And then in comes this little magical man and says, I can do this, but basically you belong to me. He said, if you ever have a child, your child belongs to me. And she ended up getting free and has a child. In comes this little man, says, your child belongs to me. She said, I can give you anything because she's now a rich woman. And he says, nothing is more valuable than a human life. He said, I'll tell you what, you can keep your child if you can guess my name. One of her servants followed the little man home and he was dancing around fire, basically singing, I am Rumpelstiltskin. Then he comes in and says, your name is Rumpelstiltskin. He's furious. And that's basically the end of the story. This story is actually at least 4,000 years old, told through different cultures. But then it also goes back to the value of like, you're promised the world, power, or riches in exchange for a child's life. Of that story just being connected through multiple cultures.
There's something dark and spiritual with that for sure.
And none of the stories ever give the reason he wanted the child.
No, yeah. He just says the child's life is worth more than anything on this earth.
God's perspective, that's his child.
Yeah.
There's nothing more valuable than his child.
Nothing hurts a father like affecting the children.
Yeah.
Makes it so much darker.
What does it profit a man to gain the entire world but lose his soul? Is the first verse that came to mind.
By sharing some of this information with you, I am in the process of violating my national security oath. The planet Earth is and has been the subject of an extensive, detailed study by several extraterrestrial civilizations. The human race is a hybrid. We were seeded here, and we have had an intimate interrelationship with high technology, advanced intelligence for hundreds of thousands of years. It hasn't stopped. They are still involved. I'm not trying to frighten you, but I'm trying to say to you that in the next very few short years, you're going to be experiencing things that are going to literally change your life in ways you have never dreamed or imagined, and you better be ready for it.
Sounds like he said that in the 80s. What is it, 30, 40 years from now? We're all hip to Project Bluebeam now.
Rabbi Felix Halpern's another friend of mine. He talks about in his near-death experience being on what kind of looked like a glass floor, and he could see demonic creatures below him.
Really?
So, and he would, I think he would probably say he was up in the third heaven in God's presence, yet he could see demonic creatures below him, which is interesting.
It's really interesting. I've avoided a lot of revelation my entire life. So I thought it was just too much for me to understand.
Right.
But when it comes to the temple, when they're talking about building the temple, and it was like a bowl of water or something, a pool of water standing on the back of like these bowls. And my pastor was talking about this, like above the water was like the image of heaven, and looking down through the water was almost like a looking glass or something, right? Those are my words.
It's very much like what Felix described.
Wow.
To him, it looked like a glass floor.
Wow. That's incredible. There is real connections there. Real connections. That's incredible.
Well, I think too, though, there's so many things at play because we approach the Bible from our modern lens, and then there's understanding the worldview of all the ancient Near Eastern people, and what we read in Scripture, and then we're trying to make sense of like what's the structure of heaven and the third heaven, second. So there's so many forces coming to play with trying to picturing that in our head.
Does heaven have a transparent floor to see into the second heaven where demons abide? I don't think any demons are in heaven. That's the first thing that comes to mind, but what a crazy theory. Imagine seeing this terrified cave wyvern that looks like a dragon.
Owen.
That has to be fake. I'd be yelling so loud if I seen that, throwing something at it. Oh, man. But what if it is real? If you thought I didn't have an excellent specimen for you today, think again. Feast your eyes on this Azurite. As the deep blue crystals pop, we have some dark green in there that is fusing with the dark blue. Definitely a earthy, cool mineral. Looks like something that just came out of outer space. How cool would it be if this was a comet that came? I really don't know what comets are, but you guys let me know in the comments below. What would you name this piece?
I really didn't want to do this, so if I disappear after this video, well, I think you'll know why. I really didn't want to do this, so if I disappear after this video, well, I think you'll know why. Everyone's been asking me about this. I can't believe I'm actually doing it, but this is 0 point energy. More specifically, this is nothing. Literally, a computer simulation of how nothing looks like. Just empty space, the simplest possible thing in our universe. And dozens of inventors have used this to build devices that seemingly create energy out of thin air. Machines that defy gravity, bend the fabric of space-time, levitate and fly with no visible propulsion, and generate virtually limitless energy with minimal to no input. But as soon as they patent and or publicize their inventions, they disappear. And at this point, there's a chance that I may too. Because this is how that technology is said to work, for entertainment purposes only. This simulation of nothing shows us that when we remove all matter, energy, and particles from any given area, what we're left with is the raw space field in which all matter exists. This is called the Higgs field and is governed by the laws of quantum mechanics. There's a principle in quantum mechanics called the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, which states that nothing is allowed to sit perfectly still, even the field itself. So even with nothing there, according to this principle, this field is constantly rippling and fluctuating in a very complicated scientific way. These are called quantum vacuum fluctuations, a sea of quantum particles that briefly blink in and out of existence from the perspective of our dimension. Put it like this: imagine a two-dimensional being that exists on a sheet of paper, Johnny Flat. If I now lay my finger on the paper, he will perceive it in his dimension as a 2D cross-section of my fingertip, basically a circle. If I lift my finger and put it down on another part of that paper, from the perspective of Johnny Flat, that circle disappeared from existence and reappeared somewhere else. Impossible from the paradigm of his reality, because I lifted my finger into the third dimension to do so, which he doesn't have access to. This is one theory of what those quantum fluctuations might be, just in higher dimensions above the three-dimensional reality we exist in, if that made any sense. Think of it as four-dimensional space dust briefly passing through our three-dimensional world. And when these quantum particles do pop in and out of existence, they create energy, which was proven in 1997 with the Casimir effect, which exerted a measurable force on two closely spaced metal plates through these quantum fluctuations. 0 point energy harnesses these fluctuations and converts them into a usable energy source, meaning empty space isn't really empty or still at all, but is actually brimming with energy. According to Hal Puthoff, a leading researcher in this field, when you crunch the numbers, we find out there's enough energy, the volume of space the size of a coffee cup, to evaporate all of the world's oceans. Energy that is not only free and virtually unlimited, but insanely powerful as well. And you'll notice that whoever advocates this type of energy is quickly labeled a fraud, a pseudoscientist, or just a wacky, evil person to discredit their claims. Well, that's because in today's society, energy is also money, dominating the biggest industries of our modern world. Energy companies, oil, coal, gas, nuclear, our entire civilization runs on the grid and relies on these expensive resources to provide us with the energy that powers everyday life. Free or wildly cheap energy that's readily available to everyone and also kinda unlimited would topple these energy empires, and to be fair, likely our entire economic system as well. So naturally, it is in the best financial interest of these trillion-dollar energy conglomerates to try to suppress 0 point energy technology if it does exist. And of course, their budget to do so is essentially unlimited, so it's exactly what they've been doing for as long as we can remember.
How interesting, not needing the ether, or is the ether all around us? That's all we have for today's video. If you made it this far, the code word is Sunday Mysteries. When you drop Sunday Mysteries in the comments below, that lets me know you made it all the way through the video, and I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart. Today I will be doubling up on you, so be sure to head over to Jet Ski Chuck later on this evening and don't miss out on any of the action. This was the most disturbing videos on the internet today. See you later.